All right, I think we're live. Welcome to SMB Stars, a talk show celebrating small business owners. Starting a business is bold and exciting, but it's also challenging. In this talk show, we put the spotlight on small business owners who have taken the bold step of starting out on their own and learn from their incredible stories. My guest today is Farah Hussain. I'm incredibly excited to chat with her. Farah, welcome to the show, and please, why don't you start with introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Komal, for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I appreciated what you had shared with me before this call about how there's a lot of content around there around later stage businesses, around corporates, but there isn't as much around people who are just starting out. And it's something that I see, even having left my corporate job recently and gone off on my own. I have so many people reaching out to me with very basic questions like, where do I even begin? I have an
Right,
idea, but where do you start?
right.
I have my own executive coaching business. I recently finished 1 year of being in business full time, although
Congratulations on your first year anniversary.
thank you so
That is
much.
great.
I had been coaching for 4 years before I took it full
Uh-huh.
time.
Hmm.
I now, after a year, having some learnings, I'm also now thinking about how I'm going to evolve the business coming into this year. So my metrics look different from what they did last year. But I will say that my focus has always been on supporting leaders with their objectives. Sometimes those objectives, especially with earlier stage companies, is around building leadership confidence. They know what they want to do with their business, but they are starting to recognize the ways in which they might be getting in their
Hmm.
own way in
Hmm.
making progress. When I work with like mid-stage companies, typically the focus ends up being around leadership effectiveness. They've kind of gotten over those initial humps and now they're leading teams that they've never had to lead before, especially when they're in CEO or COO level positions. And then the later stage companies, that's where they are focusing on leading at scale. And so what I tend to do, because I work with leaders across all different stages of companies, is first understand which stage are they in and not
Hmm.
making assumptions around where they might be. Because you could be
Hmm.
later stage and still be having a leadership confidence issue. These are
Hmm.
just generally where I see people fall.
Okay, awesome. So your business, you serve all the way from startups at very early stages to big corporations and kind of helping people in those within those big corporations with their leadership roles. Fantastic. Well, welcome to the show. Thank you for that intro. Let's kick things off. So, Farah, I know you mentioned that you started kind of coaching a couple years ago. You said 4 years ago, and then you officially launched the business about a year ago. So, was there a specific moment about a year ago where you're like, okay, I'm just going to go in full time? Like, what was that process like for you going from like working in corporate, kind of doing this as a side gig and then jumping in full time? What was that like?
Yeah, so when I first started coaching, getting trained as a coach, certified, getting my first clients, I did that as a hobby. I was doing
Mm.
it for fun. I maintained a small client base on the side for
Hmm.
over 3 years
How did you
before
start that as a hobby? That's a very interesting hobby to have. Like,
I
I'm
know.
just
And
going
like,
to get like a coaching certificate and become a coach, and that's my hobby. That's very interesting.
I got into it for a couple of reasons. As far as the coaching itself goes, and then I'll tell you about the timing. The
Uh-huh.
coaching itself is something that I realized had just been a common thread in my life, even from
Mm.
the time early when I was in college. As soon as I had guidance to give, I would start giving it to whomever I could. And
Okay.
that was not coaching. I think that was more mentoring and advising.
Uh-huh.
And I almost wonder sometimes if the reason I leaned into it was because my parents are immigrants to the US. It's not like we came here with having a network to lean on when
Correct.
it came to navigating anything, navigating school, navigating careers. And so even like when I got into college, I would look within our own community at people who needed support through high school, looking at colleges for the first time. When people were applying for their first internships, I used to read people's resumes for them. And so there was a lot of like career mentoring and advising that I had doing for years
Mm.
for fun on the side. And I got to a place in my corporate career where for the first time in like 15 years, I felt like I knew what I was doing. I was settled in my role. I had a team. It was very much a 9 to 6 job, which work had never been for me up until that point. And
Mm-hmm.
that was when I said, you've always had this interest.
Mm-hmm.
Coaching is a profession.
Mm-hmm.
There are skills that you need to be a coach that are different from the skills I might have been using to manage my team up until that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was that got me to say, I'm just going all in.
Okay, okay, that's very cool. So for a lot of entrepreneurs, right, there is something that inspires them to start their business. And for you, it looks like you've been doing some sort of coaching, mentoring, advising for a long time. And as you were doing that, like what did you enjoy about it? Like what was it that kind of kept going back to like advising and mentoring? And you mentioned it was just like for on the side for fun. Like what was fun about it for you? Like what did you enjoy about it?
The thing that I loved most about it was seeing people have their aha moments,
Nice.
seeing people find a perspective or a path that they had not seen on their own.
Okay. Okay. That's
And then of course the result, like where did they get there once they had that aha moment? But it was
yeah.
that.
Okay. Okay. All right. So now moving into how did you actually so you decided that you wanted to start this, go on in this full time. How did you fund the business initially? What was that like? And how did you get your first client? I'm assuming by this time you already have an active, set of people that you're working with. But when you went full time, like how was that getting your first paid client, I guess?
Yeah, so actually, I became a business well before I called myself a business.
Okay.
When I was in my coaching certification, they required that we have paying clients. So I had
Ah,
to get paying clients years before I ever even imagined that I would take this business full time.
okay. And how was that process like? How did you get
Yeah,
your, how did you convince anyone to,
yeah.
to become a paid client? What was that like?
Well, you know what I will say? I think, especially in the tech industry, I've been in the tech industry for most of my career. When you work in tech, you're constantly thinking about scale. What's the
Hmm.
size of the market? How big could this be? And I found that when it came to business building, initially, I was thinking way too big. I mean, I was thinking about how big the market could be when I realized I need to focus on individual people who could potentially want to work with me. And
Mm.
so, in some ways, it was like my thinking was going from working in millions and billions when I was at
Hmm.
PayPal
Hmm.
to narrowing down to what I now tell other people when they're trying to start their businesses start close to home. What are the networks that you are connected to in your day to day? Includes your family, your friends, your neighborhood. It might be a gym you go to or the parents of your kids' friends. That's your world. That is where you may find people who have what you need. And you're already beginning with an understanding of each of those communities. They already know who you are. There's some trust there to start with. And so that is how I really started my business and got my first client. My very first client came from a professional network that I was a part of. I had been in that professional group for years. I wasn't super active, but I would give something back to that community every year. And once I got into the certification program, I was like, I have 6 weeks to get 5 clients. This is required for me to be in the program. Where am I going to get them?
Okay.
And one of the things I did is in that group, I
Mm-hmm.
posted, I was very straightforward. I said, I am in this coaching program. Here's
Mm-hmm.
why I'm in it. Here's what I'm offering. I have 5 slots for people who
Mm-hmm.
might need support with X, Y, and Z. I wanted to offer it to this community first,
Mm-hmm.
and the opening is here until Y date. When I look back at that, now I get into my head so much when it comes to marketing and sales, but when I look back at that, I got 3 clients out of that.
That's impressive.
All of them were strangers. None of them knew who I was before. And
Okay.
when I look back at that, it's like it worked because I started close to home.
Yeah.
It worked because I was straightforward around what I was offering, how they could engage with me, how to self identify, whether it made sense for them to engage with me.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is a sales tactic I should use much more often, but there was a deadline. Like it was like I'm opening, and this was a very honest, it was actually an honest offer. I did
Mm-hmm.
offer it up to them first. I didn't offer it to anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave them that time frame, and I got some people interested out of it, and then they converted as well.
Okay, that's a very impressive story of how you got your first set of customers. And something you mentioned, Farah, is so true, right? As people building businesses in the very early stages, you get so caught up on how do I acquire so many customers, but you don't know, like you don't know, and you don't know how you can solve problem for thousands of customers, but you can know how to get your one customer and how to solve problem for that one customer, and then move on and get your second customer and solve the problem for the second customer. So I think that's a very fantastic perspective there. So tell me how you're evolving the business. So you have been a year into this, and at the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned that you're looking to evolve your business. So tell me how what the last year has been for you, and how are you looking to evolve the business?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I have so many thoughts on this. So
Yes.
the the first thing I will share is yes, I've been in business full time for 1 year, but I have been coaching for 5, and
Mm-hmm.
so I have been working with leaders one on one for over 700 hours at this point. That's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of data points from the last 5 years. And a couple of things I have learned as I've worked with leaders is what their needs are at different stages, as we started talking about. So, what are the kinds of problems that are out there? How can I get people from A to B in a way that is true to my process, but is also honoring the objectives that they want? And so, like over the past year, I think one thing I've done a really good job at that I don't want to lose is making sure that I am meeting my customers exactly where they are.
Mm-hmm.
When they first come to meet me, I might see what their problem is, but leading a conversation with them on where I think they are is not helpful at all. Because especially as a coach, my job is to help them ground themselves ground themselves in what's important to them and
Mm-hmm.
the path forward that's going to be important to them. And
Mm-hmm.
so meeting people where they are has been like one thing that has been really important in acquiring new customers, but
Mm-hmm.
also helping in getting them to where they want to go. So there's like 2 things. I think no matter what size company you are, what stage you might be at, that you
Mm-hmm.
just cannot abandon, which is meet people where they are, show them, let them be seen and heard, and get them the result. Like I think those 2 things are just result in terms of where they want to be. Those things are
Okay.
really important. I wouldn't take that away from this last year, but there's like when I think about how I want to evolve my business, I think about it like partly in I'm partly making a like soul centered decision around it, and partly like a very practical decision around it.
Okay.
On the soul centered side, my business has 3 values. They
Mm-hmm.
are impact, transformation, and a value that I call oneness.
Mm-hmm.
Doing one on one coaching, which has been predominantly what I've done up until this point, I am evoking transformation and I am helping people have the impact that they want to have. Those 2 things are in place. But this third value I have around oneness, oneness to me is about the interconnectedness of everyone and everything. It is about helping each of us understand that we are one part of a whole.
Mm.
And so if I want my business to live that value, I want to lean more into team coaching. I'm specifically like leaning into leadership teams. In some
Mm.
ways, I've done it a little bit, so I have exposure and I have some insight to help me get started. But in some ways,
Mm.
I feel like I'm at a beginning because
Mm-hmm.
over the last 5 years, I proved out that one-on-one offer, the
And
process, like
yeah.
what works. I
Mm-hmm.
have hypotheses around the leadership team. My
Mm-hmm.
like soul is committed to the leadership team. I
Mm-hmm.
still have a lot to learn there. But that's one reason why I'm like evolving. That's the soul-centered way of looking at it. Then
Okay.
when I'm thinking about it like as a CFO, as a CEO, a CFO, even a COO,
Mm-hmm.
I am thinking about what's going to help me make my business sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
That is like the most important thing to me right now. It's not scale, it's sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
Because this last year, my goal for myself was to, I don't mind sharing, to hit 6 figures. I'm going to hit
Mm-hmm.
6 figures in revenue. I thought it was a pipe dream
Mm-hmm.
because less than 15% of coaches ever make 6 figures in a year.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, it's really small. And like, that's another conversation. But yeah,
Okay.
so I thought like, this is my pipe dream. But
Mm-hmm.
I hit the 600. I hit the 6 figures this
That's
year.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But however, if I'm thinking
Uh-huh.
about the sustainability of my business, the way
Uh-huh.
that I got to the 100K this year
Mm-hmm.
is not sustainable. It's just not.
Mm.
That's
Okay.
one.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I think about the sustainability of the business, what that means to me is that I'm not going to be caught in some feast and famine cycle, that
Mm.
I have some sort of consistency,
Mm.
whatever that looks like. I mean, it should consider seasonality. All industries are different, but I have consistency in terms of the interest I'm getting into my business, and then the process that people have to go through before they become a client, and then what my delivery cycle looks like. And
Okay.
so, like with one-on-one coaching, particularly if you're taking more of a B2C approach, which is what I did this year, it is a bit of a dead end. This is purely thinking from a business perspective. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, definitely not from a relationship perspective. It's a bit of
Okay.
a dead end
Mm-hmm.
because some of those clients, especially if it's B2C and people are funding it on their own, people do
Mm-hmm.
not have endless funds to continue coaching, even if
Correct.
they're finding value in it.
Right. Right.
And and so like you could build a sustainable business around one-on-one coaching. There are ways to do that. But
Mm-hmm.
what I saw this year and I want to lean more into is I believe if I lean into teams, a leadership team,
Mm-hmm.
then that should is opens up a way for me to build a deeper relationship with that organization longer term.
Mm.
Team
Okay.
coaching could still lead to one-on-one coaching. It could
Okay.
lead to workshops and training. It could lead to some kind of consulting. So
Mm-hmm.
to me, I'm kind of thinking of it as what do I want the entry point to my business to be?
Mm-hmm.
How can I deepen or increase the lifetime value of a customer over time?
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is where it is, while still on this side, the soul side, while still
Mm-hmm.
allowing me to lean into that third value that I haven't
Okay.
been meeting yet.
Okay. All right, Farah, we're gonna have to unpack this. There
I
is
know,
a lot
said a
here.
lot.
So let's first start with it's super impressive that you have these values, and just a year into the business, you are using these values to now grow your business. So how did you come up with these values is the first question.
So I did hire a copywriter to help me.
Okay.
The reason why I hired her is because she's kind of like a coach copywriter.
Okay.
So what we did I reached out to her and I said, I need to document my mission, vision, and values. I need that as
Mm-hmm.
something that I can continually go back to.
Mm-hmm.
because I want to be grounded myself in
Mm-hmm.
terms of exactly what I'm working towards and what's, what values I want my business to embody as I work to those goals. So I just like needed that from a structure perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I also needed it from a marketing and sales perspective because I said, well, I need my customer, I need the market to know what I stand for, who I stand for,
Mm-hmm.
give them an understanding of whether it even makes sense for them to work with me. Are we on the same page about like what my mission is? Are we even on the same page around how we want to work together?
Mm-hmm.
So that what I did with the copywriter coach was this is my
Mm-hmm.
objective. I
Okay.
want the output to be mission, vision, values.
Okay.
And she was great because like the first part of what we did was
Mm-hmm.
she just asked me lots of questions as a coach would to
Uh-huh.
help me like navigate to
So
what
you were on the
exactly
other
the
side
goals.
of the experience,
Oh yeah, coaches.
answering answering
Yes.
questions.
Yeah, because coaches need coaches too. Like we are people at the end of the day. So we did
Yeah.
like half of our time together was that. She gave me a
Uh-huh.
couple of exercises to do as well. And then
Okay.
the second half, I came back 2 days later, was
Okay.
when we worked on the words together.
Okay.
So we know, okay, we know what I'm trying to say, but how do I want to say it? And how can I say it in a way that is clear to me, but clear to my potential customers and partners as well?
Okay. And how long does this process take?
So with her, she offers these VIP sessions where it's I did 4 hour VIP with her. So we split it up. We split it up into 2 hours one day to kind of do the
Okay.
thinking reflection. I did some
Okay.
work in between, and then we did 2 hours the next day to come up with the words.
Okay. Okay. That's no, that's interesting. So you mentioned you're moving from the one-on-one coaching to now the team coaching this year. So how do you think your marketing now changes, your customer acquisition changes, and how? Yeah. So what are your thoughts there, and how have you planned for that?
Okay, I love this question so much, and here's why I
Okay.
love it.
Okay.
I love this question because as I have been talking to some other people around what I am calling a business pivot, so many people have said to me, no, you're just repackaging. No, it's not that different. And like pushing back on what I see as a pivot. The reason why I see it as a
I don't
pivot,
necessarily think it's repackaging. I think it's another option, right? About how you're thinking of growing the business.
yeah, I'm with you. And that's why I love your question because the marketing and sales absolutely changes. When you have, what I was doing was primarily B2C.
Mm-hmm.
B2C approach is very different from a B2B approach or a
Correct.
B2B to C approach. It doesn't mean that I didn't have some B2B motions last year. I did. But by that, when I look at last year, my B2B was sure companies paid for the coaching,
Mm-hmm.
but the marketing motion was B2C. I mean, almost, not all of them, but almost all
Mm-hmm.
of the clients were people who wanted coaching for themselves.
Got it. Okay.
So to your question, like, and so in terms of, let me tell you, like, how did I get those clients? Because then I can tell you, like, what am I
Mm-hmm.
shifting?
Mm-hmm.
I got those clients in, I would say, mostly three different ways. One was LinkedIn. To my own surprise, 42% of my revenue last year came from people who had read my posts.
Okay.
They reached out,
Mm-hmm.
they did a sample set. I do free sessions with people, and then many of
Mm-hmm.
them chose to sign up.
Mm-hmm.
So LinkedIn was a big source for me.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were existing clients who were just continuing on.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them were events where just like I was doing more, I guess you could call traditional networking through those
Mm-hmm.
events.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one or two that came in last year where people found me through a Facebook group. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
an HR leader who said, I'm in this moms in tech group
Mm-hmm.
and I saw your name come up more than once in the group. So she reached out. We had a conversation a few months later. I ended up working with one of our leaders.
Okay.
So that was like the before. But to your question, how do things have to change now that you're B2B? When I think about the motion now, it doesn't mean that any of the things I've done previously couldn't be activities that are part of the B2B. But for me, the B2B sales cycle is very different from
Right.
B2C that like converts in 1 to 2 weeks. Like that's what was
Correct.
happening. The conversion is really
Correct.
fast.
Yeah.
So I see myself having to follow like more of a traditional process of prospecting. Who are the audiences that who are the audiences that influence these potential customers? Because I think they could be potential like lead-ins to the customers I want. Where are some of these target people all like just naturally spending their time? Maybe some are LinkedIn, maybe they're not, but like where are they spending their time? And then from there, going into a longer sales cycle to better understand exactly what their needs are that that they need support with, and then proposing a solution for them. So I'm kind of what I'm envisioning more on the B2B side is like there's the prospecting piece, there's the getting to know the customer better piece and understanding really what they need, and then there's putting together a proposal. Not those things have just not been the same on the B2C side.
Okay.
So I'm like
Okay.
mentally prepared for a longer sales cycle. Who
Okay.
knows? Maybe there won't be, but I'm preparing for a longer sales cycle.
Okay.
And I'm trying to now, like, I'm trying to really understand who are the audiences that need to know me. That could then help me make some of the connections I need to make.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's impressive just hearing you say that. I feel like you have a good plan. And anything, starts with a good plan. So let's talk a little bit about something you mentioned earlier in the conversation, right? For this answer is how LinkedIn, you got 42% of your revenue last year from LinkedIn. Um, Tell me more about how you went about building that audience on LinkedIn. How did you think about how often you want to write, what kind of posts you wrote? Because yes, LinkedIn is turning into a very powerful channel for business owners to kind of be out there and make connections. So how did you approach that?
Yeah, so I chose LinkedIn for a couple of reasons. I chose it because I knew my potential customer is there. I didn't know necessarily how to reach them, but I know that they're there. That was one. Then, in terms of what the approach was, I said to myself going into the year, pick a channel that you're going to be consistent in. Pick a channel that you
That's so
will,
true, and that's very important.
yeah, the consistency part.
Yes, yes,
Yeah, because without the consistency, you're not going to get enough data to learn what works or doesn't work.
right.
And so I said, okay, my audience is here. I'm going to be consistent and I am going to write about, I'm going to focus on topics that I know are important to them. Because at this point, when I really started getting into LinkedIn, I had already been coaching for 4 years. So I have 4 years of one-on-one client experience and I know what their challenges are. At least I know from the people that I had been coaching up until that point. And so a lot of my approach on LinkedIn was not super efficient. Like I was not creating content, batching it, scheduling it. I was quite literally, I would be in a session, at the end of a week of coaching, and I would realize
Uh-huh.
oh, there's this theme that came up across 3 of the clients
Uh-huh.
this week.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to write about that on Monday.
Okay. Okay. So it was more ad hoc, but consistent, but ad hoc.
Ad hoc. It was extremely inefficient. I mean, I will tell you, but
Okay.
yeah, but I was okay with spending the extra time on it this year because I said, I really want to figure out what type of content resonates with people. which type of content is driving engagement, but which type of content is getting people to reach out to me. Because you can get all the engagement in the world, but if it's not converting, like, what's the point from a business perspective?
Correct.
Unless your point is like just to be inspirational and it's not about running a business at all, which is that's a different goal.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
And so, yeah, like there's, and then, yeah, mostly it was that the content was inspired by challenges, thoughts, needs that I would see coming up across multiple people.
Okay.
And if we talk from a numbers perspective, the type of content that gets the most engagement was the content that was more personal, because you want people to see who you are too.
Correct.
It gets the most engagement, but that's not what gets people to call you. The stuff that gets people to call you is like if I have a post that's around like a very specific concern somebody has, that gets like 30 likes, sometimes even less. Those
But
are
it
the
gets people
things.
to call you. Okay. Okay. So
Those are the things.
engagement is not always equal to conversion. That is good to know as people are putting together their marketing plans.
Yeah.
So as you now pivot from the one-on-one coaching to the team coaching. So of course, your sales and marketing, like you mentioned, it's a long sales process, and you're figuring out your plan there. What channels are you thinking you're going to explore?
Oh yeah. Okay, great question. I'm just gonna like put all my ideas out there if anybody wants to take some of them. So no, but I will. I don't mind.
Uh-huh.
I have a few ideas. One, investors. Over the last year, I did start building up my network of early stage investors. I wouldn't say that I built any really deep relationships, but it really helped me to just get a lay of the land. I think investors can be one great path for me to get to the companies that I want to get to support teams. Because I do want to lean into companies that are less than 1,000 employees. I
Okay.
think like over the course of the next year of learning, I might even narrow that more in terms of exactly what size. But less than 1,000 employees, high growth companies. So I think VCs are a route there. That's one. Then on LinkedIn, I'm a little like still trying to figure out what I want to do with LinkedIn. I have like shied away from things like Sales Navigator on LinkedIn because I'm on the receiving end of a lot of that stuff, and I'm like, this is not how I want to sell. This is not how I want to be.
Okay.
But I will say I'm getting closer and closer to buying it, not necessarily to like cold call the way that people have cold called me over the last year plus. I'm sure it's the same for all of us, but I actually think it could help me with prospecting, even if I use it just to like try to get closer to some of the profile, help me like refine what my target profiles are going to be. I think it could help. So LinkedIn is still a channel.
Okay.
And then the third one, I want to be more intentional around like the types of events that I attend. So again, like last year, I went to a lot of different types of events just to like, get a feel for things. But I do want to be a little more focused in terms of like where am I showing up and what do I want to learn when I get to those events. Who do I want to connect with, but also just what do I want to learn?
Okay. Okay. Well, this is all great. This is all great. Really, Farah, like I feel like you have very interesting sort of ideas and a very concrete plan on how to execute those ideas. So I'm super excited. I'm sure the team pivot is it's going to pan out just great. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about what kind of tools you use to organize, your business, and now as you grow into a different segment. So LinkedIn, you mentioned, is a powerful tool. You use it for sales and marketing and outreach. But are there other tools? Like, how do you leverage technology in growing your business coming from the tech world?
Yeah, and this is so embarrassing for me to answer because coming from, especially coming from the tech world, I mean, I look across my business and I'm like, you don't have any automation. You don't. It's so easy from the outside for me to see, for me to know
Uh-huh.
what a well-oiled machine could look like
Uh-huh.
and actively choosing not to lean into it because
Mm-hmm.
just because of the stage that I'm at and I'm one person. And so when I have to think about where am I going to invest my time, what I
Mm-hmm.
have done, especially when it comes to tech, tools and tech, I just think about what do I absolutely need in place so that I can focus my time on the sales and the delivery
Mm-hmm.
and still make sure nothing else falls apart. So it's kind of like what are the bare minimum things I need in place? I will absolutely need to like optimize them at some point. But I'll give you examples of that because I've thought of it more as like what are specific tasks that I need done rather than
Mm-hmm.
even thinking about the system. It's like what are the tasks I need done that I just like don't want to put a lot of time into because it's
Mm-hmm.
not sales and delivery oriented and like
Mm-hmm.
find a tool to help me with that. So, for example, I do have accounting software. I use QuickBooks. Tried
Okay.
other things. I feel like this happens to a lot of people. You try other things and you just end up in QuickBooks.
Yeah. I mean, it's simple and easy to use, so why not?
Once it's set up, it's simple and easy to
Once it's set up,
use.
yeah. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly. And so
yeah.
the setting up was was painful, and I ended up hiring people to do it because I was like, I
Okay.
just can't. I just can't spend
Okay.
time on this.
Okay.
But like I have QuickBooks set up,
Mm-hmm.
and it is what it does the things I need it to do. I can very clearly see my financial reports, so I know what is happening across the business. Like it
Mm-hmm.
takes me 1 second to like pull it up and look at it.
Mm-hmm.
I do send invoices through that, so I can see what needs to go out and what has not been paid,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can see how much money I have. So all of that is just like right there. It's
Okay.
just right there.
Okay.
I do have an accountant. I do have they have bookkeeping services that sometimes I use part of that when I need it. But
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, the way I've thought about it is as the CEO of my business, I need visibility into the financials. I need to make
Mm-hmm.
sure I am requesting money when needed and I'm receiving money when I need it. But like
Mm-hmm.
that's about it. Anything more than
Mm-hmm.
that, like doing my taxes, I'm not going to do that. Like the accountant's going to do that.
Okay. Okay. So basically focusing on the core part of your business and then finding tools and finding options to offload other parts of the business, still staying very much in the loop on what's happening, but making sure you're offloading so that you have time freed up. That's great. And I guess what is one thing about you that people don't know and would be surprised to know? Let's end the talk show with that.
Okay. One thing a lot of people don't know is
Hmm.
that I was a studio art major in college, which
Okay.
is painting.
Okay. So you
Um,
love painting. Do you have any art around the house which you have made?
I do. Actually, both of these things behind me are mine.
Wow. Okay, I can see the one on your right, but
You
not
could put,
one on. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that one's like facing the other direction. They
Okay.
are. A lot of people don't know that, and I, I find that it does influence the way I it does influence the way that I think about my customers. Not necessarily always my business, but it influences the way I
Mm-hmm.
think about my customers. It influences, it kind of does influence the way I run my business too. And here's how I would say it does.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I was in corporate, I think it influenced me there. When because I was a studio art major, one of the things that is common to our every class that you take
Mm-hmm.
is we are required to participate in what you call critiques. A
Mm.
critique means you quite literally put your work in front of the class and then everybody talks about it.
Okay.
What's good about it? What could be better? You
Mm-hmm.
do that. We used to do it every single. week at minimum every week, depending on the class. And
Mm-hmm.
what I appreciated about those critiques is that it teaches you to not get too attached to anything that you've created. And I think,
Mm-hmm.
like, even especially when you're a business owner, I mean, everything is so personal.
So personal, yeah. Yeah.
Or you're in corporate and, like, you've spent weeks or
Yeah.
months working on
Yeah.
something, and then
Yeah.
the company decides to scrap it for whatever reason. It decides
Yeah.
to change another direction. And
Yeah.
there was I still remember there was like one example, can't remember the exact context, but when I was at PayPal, I think
Mm-hmm.
like I had worked on something with the team for a really long time, and then
Mm-hmm.
direction was changing, and
Mm-hmm.
like people were really upset. And that was when I realized, like, this is the this is the studio art part of me that is able to move on really fast, because if
Mm.
there is a better way or a different way
Sure, why
to
not?
get to where we're trying to go, like, it's
Yeah.
fine. It's fine that I
Okay.
stayed up like half the night to make that thing for class today, because there is a better way.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, that was a good way to end the show. Farah, thank you so much for coming on the show. I personally learned so much from you. So thank you for sharing all of your insights and all of the things you've done so far to grow your business and things you plan to continue to do as you grow your business. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much.